We're going to look at starting our project plans for cabinet making 2. And so we're going to start with the front view with the foot or trim. And there's some instructions. There's an instructional video that will help walk you through step by step. That's the video you're watching now. There's an example of what this view should look like when you're done. And then there's information on how to submit your different views and what the supporting documents you need with those views are. And sorry, back here in SketchUp, we're going to take a look. And what I'm going to be drawing today is this example project here. What I was looking for is one that has quite a bit of details. Now, yours does not need to be this project. This is just an example of how to draw different parts of the cabinet and so forth. Your limitations are it needs to be cabinet making related. So it needs to be a project that has, a face frame, needs to have some doors and drawers. And so we're really open to any project that you would like to build as long as it meets these criteria. So we're going to build this. I'm going to draw it to some specifications here, and you can follow along as we draw here. I'm going to slide some things over so we can see that as well. I'm going to start by drawing the overall shape of my project. So I'm going to come over, and I think I'm going to make this, let's go 40 inches wide. So I'm going to come down 80 inches. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Come down 80 inches. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to connect these lines here. So this represents my overall project. So now what we need to do is determine how high up we want this bottom part. If you want those drawers, how big you'd want the drawers, how many drawers you want. You also want to make sure your longest gun over here would fit in your project. Now, for most of you, your biggest gun is probably a 12 gauge. Maybe you have some exotic or specific gun or unique gun that's a little longer, and you'd want to make sure that fits in there. So you're limited by those parameters of where you're going to put this. Today, I'm going to come up 24 inches. And this is where my cabinet is going to be split in two, like you see here. Okay. And so if I come up 24 inches, and maybe this is a little high for you. Again, this is just all an example of different things you might see and how to draw. This isn't necessarily you're making this cabinet. This is just some information for you to follow along and see how you would do each process. So I came up 24 inches. And I'm going to have a little overhang on this. We're going to come out 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches. This just allows you to see that there is a splice in the cabinet there. So I'm going to take my pencil tool again, and we're going to draw. I'm going to pull this up. We're going to come up, and our tops are typically, after we sand them, about 7/8 of an inch. And 7/8 of an inch over here. And I'm going to connect that. Clearly showing that we've got two different projects here. So, and we have a bottom part of our cabinet and a top part of our cabinet. So now what we're going to do is start filling in the face frame. We're going to start with the stiles. Stiles are on our sides, and we can have them 1.5 inches up to about 2 inches wide is really all the bigger we need to go structurally. You could go bigger for aesthetic reasons, but for structural reasons, 1.5 inches to 2 inches should be good. So I'm going to come over 1.5, and I'm going to find my dot. It looks like it didn't go. 1.5, enter. Why is it not? There it is. And I'm going to pull that all the way down to there. Now I'm going to come to this side and do the same thing, 1.5, and pull that line down. And while we're here, we could do this one as well, because it's going to need its own face frame as well, since we have two different cabinets making up this one project. And now I have that. Now the top rail is going to be typically 1.5 inches, but it depends on what you're doing. You can see here there's kind of this big trim piece that goes around this. Now, if you want some kind of crown molding around your top or a big trim like that, then maybe this top rail needs to be a little bit bigger so that it's not covering it all the way up and your door has something to touch against. So once you've decided what you want to do to the top, if it's crown molding, great. If it's bigger trim, that's fine. If it's no trim, since we are higher than about 6 foot where somebody would see, you really wouldn't have to do anything up there, but it's up to you. And so I'm going to take this and I'm just going to come down. I'm going to come down 2 inches. That's going to give me room for my door and some crown molding. And you maybe even do bigger than that, maybe a 3-inch piece if you want it. Down here, I'm going to come up 1.5 inches, 1.5, to match the rest of my face frame. And down here, I'm going to come down 1.5 to create the face frame down here. And down on the bottom, we should have a 4.5-inch bottom rail. This gives us room for the trim to sit on top of the face frame. So we'd have a 3-inch trim and 1.5 inch reveal when we're done. So we're going to draw this with the feet right on here. Since from Cabinet Making 1, you should know how big this was, 4.5 inches, and why it's 4.5 for the trim, and that the trim goes all the way to the floor. So I'm going to just draw this on here 3 inches out. Nope, I'm sorry. We're going to be 7/8 of an inch out and up 3 inches. And I'm going to do the same to the other side. I'm going to come out 7/8 and up 3. And I'm going to connect those dots. Now, in reality, we're not going to see anything that goes through here. So I would delete all of this and all of this here. So the trim is hanging off the 7/8, and you'll need to dimension this later. But right now, we're just in the drawing phase. I'm going to move up here on my cabinet, and this piece here is one piece. This solid top here is actually has an overhang on it. So I'm going to delete that line because they're 2 separate cabinets. One sits on top of the other. So that's what I want there. And again, up on the very top, it's going to depend on what you want to do. If you want the crown molding, or if you want to put a solid top, you could have a solid top just like you did down here on the divider, or you could do the crown molding, which hangs off at about a 45-degree angle. Let's show you what this crown molding would possibly look like then. So I'm going to just come down. I want the crown molding to overlap about a 1/2 inch. I'm going to come down 0.5. That gives me something for it to hold on to. It could even be more. Let's go 1 inch. Let's come down 1 inch. And that way it's got some good attaching or good stability on there. And I'm going to draw that line all the way across. That represents the bottom of my molding. So now I got the bottom line drawn. I'm going to come up 3 inches. And this is going to be my next reference line. And I'm going to come all the way over to the side here. And so this represents my trim. And now what I'm going to do now is I'm 3 inches tall. So I'm going to come out another 3 inches and draw that line back. That's a 45-degree angle. I'm going to come out 3 inches and draw that line back. And then we would delete this here and this here. We could still see the face frame underneath if you wanted to leave that for a visual reference, but in reality, when the project's done, you're going to just see the crown molding on there, which might look something like this. You could also do a different angle, 45 degrees, or about a 30-degree angle, whatever, somewhere in there, 45 degrees to 30 degrees, whatever you prefer. So that's going to represent my crown molding there. And that's going to just be there to give me some lengths for my measurement and kind of give me a better understanding of what this might look like when we're all done. So now what we're going to do is your doors and drawers and everything are going to be drawn off to the top. But if we come back here and take a look, there's this divider right here on the top half. So I'm going to put that in. I'm going to make that 12 inches over. I'm going to 12-inch opening. So I'm going to come here from 12 inches. And that's going to be right there. And then I should have 1.5 inches for the face frame. So again, I'm going to come over 1.5, and that is my face frame there. Now, if these are adjustable shelves, I wouldn't draw them in. But if they're fixed shelves, they need to be drawn in. The adjustable shelves, we would just make a note that these were adjustable and that they need to have pinholes for the adjusting to different sizes. So for this example, I'm going to draw this with some shelves that are fixed. So you get the idea here. I'm going to come up from the bottom. I'm going to make this bottom one a little bit bigger. I'm going to come up 24 inches. That might be a little high. Let's try this again. I'm going to come up 16 inches. And I'm going to put a line across. Now, we also need to have a face frame on this. If it's a fixed shelf, we should have a face frame so it has structure. So I'm going to come back down an inch and a half and draw that line. So 16 inches underneath here would fit. And I'm going to come up another 16 inches looks like a good size. So I'm going to come up again 16 inches. Now, of course, this is all going to matter or depend on what you have planned to go in here and what size of opening you need. If you have something specific that needs to fit here, then of course you would want to do a smaller size. We have 19 inches left. I'm going to move these a little bit. So I know there's 16 inches. I'm going to draw a box around here and I'm going to move this up 4. That's going to make it 20 inches. So I'm moving it up 4 inches, enter. And I'm going to take the next one and I'm going to give a little bit more room here. I highlight it, make it blue. I grab the 4 arrow move tool. And when I click the corner, I pull straight up. And down here in the bottom where it says distance, you can see how far I'm going. So I want to make sure I'm straight and I'm coming up 4 inches. Okay. And so the 2 outside ones are a little bit bigger. If you want them all symmetrical, we could pull some dimensions and find out what needs to be moved where. So that's 15 5/8, 14 1/2, and 18. So we could move this one actually down a little bit and get these all symmetrical if you want them to appear that way. So we're going to come down 1.5 inches. And that's 17, 16, and 15 1/8. So they progressively get bigger. That works too. However you want to position those. And again, if you need more or less in there, you could do that as well. Maybe this is an opening for one gun. This is your specialty gun, and you want to have it in its own cavity, and then the rest of your guns are over here on the side. That would work as well. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is down here on the bottom, they have drawers. And, you know, if I put ammo or whatever in here, that might be a lot of weight. So I'm going to leave this open, and this is going to actually be 2 doors here. 2 door openings. And I'm going to not have a divider, so when I get in here, I can grab everything. This was going to be an open cavity, open cavity, open cavity. Now, what I am going to have an open cavity, I need to have my barrel rest drawn in here. And so I'm just going to draw that in as a reference point. And that's going to be about 7/8 of an inch thick. And I'm going to draw that over. And this represents my barrel rest. And what you can't see down here would be my butt holder. Okay, my stock holder down here on the end. So besides labeling this, I would think that we're about done with the front view. And remember to label it, you're going to use the A1 tool. Now, we need to be specific. So I have 2 cabinets, so I'm going to have to label this style 1 because these styles are a different size than these styles. So these would be style 2. Okay, same up here. We have a top rail, 1, and down here we have a top rail 2. And down here we have a bottom rail 2. And up here we have a bottom rail 1. And this divider is called a center style. So we're going to go ahead and type center style. And then we have these pieces here. These 2 would be center rails. So I'm going to just type center, enter rail to make sure I have enough room. I'm going to move that up a little bit so we can read it. And then I'm going to label the other one. And I don't have to distinguish these 2, center rail. And the reason for that is they're the same size. Now, they're the same size, same part. If they were different, then I would need to have center rail 1, center rail 2. If there was a center style down here for my doors, I'd have center style 1, center style 2. And this is my barrel rest. Now, we should have everything labeled and dimensioned, so anybody coming into the shop can view these plans and have an understanding of what you're building. They could actually take these plans and could build this project for you. Say something happens and you're out of school and we need someone to work on your project for you for whatever reason, then we could figure out how big all of this stuff is off of your plans. We wouldn't need to have any guessing work done. So you would want to dimension all of this, how wide, how tall, and so forth, so that we can have no questions of how big things are. All right, and we want to know how big this trim is down here. How far is it hanging off? And if you remember, you can right click or control click for text position and try start or end. If it doesn't look good, then go ahead and try the other direction. And that looks good. My overhang here was 1.5 inches, and so I'm going to kick that out. And what we do on one side, we don't have to do to the other. So I don't really need to have 1.5 inches over here because this one is indicating to me it's 1.5 inches. Now I should also have everything else drawn. And one thing that I probably should have not done is taken off my inch mark here. So remember, if you remember, I came down 1 inch on the plans for that trim. And so I'm going to use that 1 inch notch there to give me my overall size of the cabinet, 80 inches. So that's what it was when I typed it in. And what else do we need? How long is the crown molding? How long is the bottom trim? And how tall is the crown molding? What else do we need? This top rail, we should have that dimension. How big is that top rail? Because that top rail was a little bit bigger than normal. We went an extra 1/2 inch. And again, I can't really read that, so I'm going to kick that out to the start side. And we're going to want to know what the overall length of this top is because we're going to need that later on. And I'm not really sure where you're going to put that it's going to be real noticeable or visible. It's kind of cut off a little bit there, but that should be fine. Now we need to go through and add the wood grain as well. And we want to make sure we get the wood grain on the work pieces, not on the dimension line. So things that go side to side are my rails. And I might leave like this top blue so that we can see that a little bit easier. And maybe that bottom rail there, I'm just going to purposely leave a couple things so we can see them a little easier if they are in the way of something else. But generally speaking, we want all the wood grain on there. Okay, so I left that shelf blue so we can very easily see that it's its own piece. I left that top rail so you can see where the top rail is or represented over the crown molding. We have not a couple of more dimensions we need here is we need the overall height of this bottom part. And I don't want to overlap things here, so I'm going to take my move tool and select this style 2 and move that in a little bit. And I'm going to take my piece over here and I want to know what this overall height is. And I want my smaller dimensions in first and my bigger dimensions out further. So trying to keep it a little organized there. And anything else that we need on here, we should label and dimension. But this is a digital copy, so if we forget to add something, we can always open this up and add those things that we need. A few other dimensions that we're going to need on here is we'll want to know how big this bottom rail is. It should be 4.5 inches. And we can text position that out one direction so we can read it better. And then we would want to have on each face frame just a dimension or two so we get the idea of how big the rest of the face frame pieces are. And so I'm just going to put a few more of these on here. We've got the styles. If one style is 1.5 inches, the other one's probably 1.5 inches, the top's dimension there. Let's come up here. And again, our top was already dimensioned. So maybe just put a couple other of the rail sizes on here. From there to there. Find a good spot to house it. And maybe, you know, somewhere in here. And, you know, it doesn't hurt to have, you know, the more measurements, the more data someone has to try to figure out all of the different pieces, or you have when you're trying to build this project. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to have all this extra information. I also dimensioned how high we were up from the top of the shelf or the bottom of the cabinet here to the top of that shelf and the top of that shelf. I figured that might be something we'd want later on. The gun barrel rest really right now isn't important where the height is. We have it in there so we can calculate for wood, but you know, if we want to be higher or lower, you know, if you have 22s, it might be lower. If it's, you know, all shotguns, it might sit a little higher. So we're going to go ahead and save this. You should make sure you're saving your work often. File, save, or Control S will do the job. And the first time you save it, it's going to ask you for a name. And so I'm just going to label it here. It's going into my documents folder so I can find it easier later on. All right, so that would kind of be what we see from our front view. And it's up to you if you want to draw this in different documents, or if you want to draw it in one document, that's up to you. So once you've got everything labeled and dimensioned, then we can start on the next view.